Hi, this is Marlene Einhelig reporting from Dillingham, Alaska on Unit 15 Screencast. First off, I would like to discuss the temperature, the dew point, and the relative humidity. As you can see, the temperature at the beginning of the 25th started off at about -4 degrees, and the temperature dropped into the 26th and rose into the 27th, dropped, rose throughout the day, dropped into the night, rose into the day, dropped into the night, and then had a similar curvature up until the 30th, where then the temperature had a dramatic rise into the 31st, and the temperature began to drop on February 1st and rise again on the 2nd. I noticed that the dew point temperature had about the same curvature as the temperature, so I thought there was a relationship between the temperature and the dew point temperature. As you can see, it dropping from the 25th into the 26th, where it dropped from the 25th into the 26th, and in the 27th it rose and fell along with the temperature, and on the 28th, where the temperature rose throughout the day and fell into the night, you can see the dew point rising into the day and falling into the night. And on the 31st, when the temperature rose, stayed consistent from the morning of the 31st into the day of the 31st, the dew point also rose and stayed about consistent, and then fell and then rose with the temperature into the second day of February. And I would like to now go on into the pressure and the temperature comparison. As you can see, the pressure started off low and then rose throughout the week and then fell again. And I thought there was another relationship here between the pressure and the temperature, where the temperature started off at about -4 at its highest temperature, and then again on the same day the pressure was low, and as the temperature went down the pressure went up, and as the pressure went down the temperature went up. The temperatures of January and February, as you can see, started off at about average, and for most part of the week it was lower than average, and then it went up to about average, and then it fell and then started to go up on the second day of February. The reason behind the lower temperatures than average for January and February would have been due to the tilt of that part of the earth during this season, which is in the winter. On January 25th, the Eagle, Alaska, was in a low system, and if you could remember, the temperatures were in the average at -4 degrees, and as you can see, there's fog and clouds. And then on January 29th, Eagle moved into a high system where there was winds coming in from the north, and there is still cloud cover on the 29th. And the temperatures for today, if you could remember, were in the negative 40s with a minimum that reached about a negative 45. The dew point temperature for the 29th would have been between about 35, negative 35, and the relative humidity was at about 75% for this day. The 29th, you can see some thin cloud cover, and on the visible image, can't really see anything. On the infrared, again thin, and then the water vapor is thin, but it is more visible on the water vapor than on the visible and the infrared. On the 31st, there are 3 high systems that Eagle is surrounded by. On the 31st, if you could remember, the temperatures were going up and the pressure is beginning to fall. For the month of March, the temperatures were mostly above average. Starting off on the 22nd at about 25, 24 degrees in the morning, cooling off or about staying the same, and then the temperature rises throughout the day and falls into the night. Rises throughout the day and falls throughout the night, and that's the curvature of the temperature throughout the week. I noticed that the dew point temperature again followed the temperature, except for in the early morning on the 23rd, where it spiked, had a quick spike, but then fell with the temperature, rose with the temperature during the day, fell, rose with the temperature. So making the point that I saw the dew point and the temperature had the same increase-decrease relationship. And looking at the weather maps and the temperatures, the 24th in Eagle was clear, and then into the 26th, when the relative humidity and dew point were overlapping, the weather was foggy, and by looking at this, there would be a chance of precipitation on these overlaps. On March 24th, as you can see, Eagle has clear skies, and for this day the temperature was above average, with a high on the 24th at about 42-43 degrees and a low at about 11 degrees. And for today, the pressure system was in the highs and was at or around the highs for this week, referring to the pressure readings in millibars for the week. For the 26th, Eagle was in a low pressure system, and if you could remember looking at the graph, this is when the temperature stayed in the highs throughout the day and night. And starting on the 26th, the dew point rose and the relative humidity stayed at about 30% during the day and then rose to about 30% on the 27th. Throughout the day of the 27th, the temperature stayed above average, with the highest temperature of the day being at about 49 degrees Fahrenheit, and the dew point temperature stayed up at about 21, with the highs in the evening being at about 23 degrees Fahrenheit, and the relative humidity was at its lowest at about 30% during the day, and then started to rise into the 28th. On the 28th, there's warm air blowing up from the south into Eagle, with skies clearing, and the temperatures where it was moving back to the normal range. The lowest temperature for today was at about 18 degrees, and the highest temperature around in the evening, around 15 to 18 hours, was at about 48 degrees. Here, the dew point was at about 65%, and the relative humidity was opposite, where it fell during the day and then rose, where there were two crosses where the paths intertwined between the dew point and the relative humidity, which tells me that there would be a chance of precipitation for this day. For the 24th, the skies were clear and the temperatures were above average, and the dew point was at about 23 degrees Fahrenheit, with a relative humidity being opposite at the same time of the day, being at about 50%. And as you can see in the visible image, there's mostly clear skies. In the infrared, there's mostly clear skies, and with the visible there you can see some thin cover. The 26th, again there was cloud cover. In the visible you can see some cloud cover. In the infrared you can see some cloud cover, and with the water vapor there's some thin cover. On this day, the temperatures were above average. The pressure had fallen from the 23rd into today, the 26th. The dew point was on a rise, and the relative humidity had a little fall and then went back up into the 27th. And for a recap, the January-February pressure climbed throughout the week, matching the decrease in temperature, and then the pressure began to fall through the week, and then the temperature began to rise. This is showing that the drop in temperature brought the climb in high pressure for January and February. And March was warmer due to, again, to the change in the tilt of the Earth in March. The sun would be more present during the day, so allowing for the temperature to become higher compared to the temperatures in January and February. And